I think we are live now. Welcome to the RDA Business Outputs and Adoption session. I'll just give a few 30 seconds or so for while people start to sort of come into the room. I can see in the chat on the right hand side here that there's multiple people entering the room as we speak. So I'll just give you some time to just sort of get settled in front of your monitors. Hopefully you'll see on screen myself when my video is on, and there's also a slide. So the slide deck will be displayed on the right hand side here. Well, my right hand side. So if you want to see the slides in more detail, just hit the expand button on the right hand side, or the expand screen button, even, sorry, on the bottom right of the window. You can see lots of thumbs up. So we can get started properly in a few more seconds. Just wait for everybody to join us. So I'm going to switch on to my slides. Just switch on to the first one. Okay, everybody. So welcome everyone again to the RDA Business Outputs and Adoption session. My name is Ryan O'Connor, and I am a research data specialist here at the Digital Creation based at the University of Edinburgh. I work alongside the RDA Secretariat, focusing on RDA outputs and their adoption, and I'll be chairing today's session. So before I give you a brief outline of what our presenters today will be focusing on, I'd just like to run through a few sort of housekeeping points. So just to point out, the first thing for this morning's plenary session, this session is recorded. You should hopefully you will be able to see a little red recording button on your screen somewhere. So as is a plenary session, as it is a main stage sort of session, all attendee mics will be muted and your cameras will be disabled. However, there is the chat function available on the right-hand side of the screen, so we encourage attendees to interact with one another here. We'll also ask if you have any questions for any of our presenters today, that you can submit the questions via the Q&A box, also on the right-hand side of the screen. We have two sections in the session today for the Q&A, so we can get to those at these sections. The slides and recordings of the session will be made available after the session via the Juno platform, and we'll hopefully have these on there available via the RDA site within a few weeks. So again, as I've said already, to see the slides that we're using today, you can click the expand screen button on the bottom right hand side of the slides window. And as always, hopefully you're hearing and seeing everyone okay, and you're hearing my audio okay this morning. But if you are having any issues with either slides refreshing or audio connection, just please try refreshing your browser, and that hopefully re-establish the connection. So I'm just going to go on to my next slide. Yeah, just a little bit of further housekeeping. So obviously we're at the second day of the plenary now, so that we all should hopefully have a bit more experience on the platform at this stage. But just for the remainder of just some housekeeping for the remainder of the plenary session. So we're encouraging everyone basically. We think it's important as well for everyone, either breakout session chairs or speakers and attendees, to make full use of the training rooms that that are provided on the Juno platform. So you can go in there. They're available on the Juno platform, so the landing page and the main page of the plenary. You can go in here at any point. These are open, I think, 24 hours, where you can just go in and test out functionality of the platform. You can just make sure your speaker and audio and slide sharing and screen sharing is working all okay. We also encourage and we think it's important as well for speakers and session chairs and presenters to make full use of the green room function that we're providing. So essentially, this is where the rooms for each of the individual breakouts and plenary sessions will be open for the listed speakers and session chairs 30 minutes in advance. So you can get in here and just make sure that everything's working before your session starts. You can make any sort of last minute checks on screen sharing, audio, etc. And obviously as well, if you come across anything that isn't working for you, please do get in touch before your session starts, if possible, obviously, via there's the help desks on the plenary, on the platform main page, and there's also the little Q&A, the chat box function, which on the main screen will be a little sort of a purple or pink color circle on the bottom right hand side of the screen. Finally, as well, you can take advantage of the speaker and share FAQ documents and guidance is available on the RDA website. And there's a link here on screen, but I'm sure one of my colleagues will help out here and just paste that link into the chat, just so everyone has a quick sort of access to it. Okay, so moving back to the focus of today's session. So the session today will be slightly different from adoption and output sessions at previous plenaries, where the aim would have been to highlight and promote cases of the adoption of RDA outputs. We've made the decision to slightly alter the focus of this session to take into account a longer term view of RDA activities and how they extend into the future. So looking at RDA's long-term plans for sustainability, the overlap between the work of the RDA groups and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And we'll also look at the role that a new type of group and the communities of practice will play in the future of the RDA. The ultimate aim is still to sort of encourage the uptake and adoption of RDA outputs, and our presenters today will show how RDA helps to build the social and technical bridges needed to address the grand challenges of society, and with adoption efforts really being key to applying the sort of knowledge and expertise of the RDA community to sort of practical issues of concern with data sharing and exchange and interoperability, these types of things. So moving on to the agenda for today's session, which is now on screen. So first we'll start off with a presentation from Hilary Hanaho, Natalie Harrower and Rebecca Koskela, who will be presenting on the RDA strategic plan, the implementation priorities and financial sustainability. We'll then move on to a presentation which will be kicked off by Edith Herzog, who's an RDA council member, on the incorporation of the SDGs into RDA groups and bodies. As part of this as well, we'll also hear from the other co-chairs of the RDA Sustainable Development Goals interest group. And after this session, then we'll have there will be a Mentimeter poll on the presentation of the SDGs interest group has given, and also we'll have time to sort of address any questions for either of the first two presenters. Then we'll move on to a presentation from Cynthia Pear, who is a co-chair of the Agricultural Data Interest Group, who will be speaking about the Agricultural Data Community of Practice group, which is currently sort of in the process of being established. This is a recorded presentation, which Cynthia has provided to us, so we'll have to bear with us while we just change tabs and change the screen for that one. But seeing as Cynthia isn't here with us today, her colleague on the Agricultural Data Interest Group, Emma Subrats, will be here to take any questions. And then finally, we'll just have a brief wrap up of 2 or 3 slides for myself, just to close the session out. So yeah, now I'll just hand over to yourself, Hilary. I will have these slides on screen the whole time, so these won't change for people. So just Hilary and Natalie and Rebecca, just shout out next slide. Now I'll transfer it on. So over to you, Hilary.
Can you hear me well, Ryan? Yeah. Great. So thank you very much for this introduction, Ryan. And I'd also like to take the opportunity of thanking you and Mary, particularly from the Secretariat, for organising this session and all the hard work that you put into it, for the speakers for accepting, of course, to join us today. We are on day 2. I found yesterday really exhilarating. It's not the same. I know it's not the same than being together, but I think it was a wonderful experience. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Secretariat for all their hard work yesterday, the organising team. We see what goes on in the background. I know you've had some challenges. I think they're doing a fantastic job of managing those challenges that people are having, and please show your appreciation for them. A shout out for Alex, who really is wonderful for doing it, so thank you for that. Right, moving on, strategy, implementation and financial sustainability. So this is what we call, for those of you who are new to RDA, the business session. And like many organizations, our stakeholders, our shareholders, if you like, are you, the community. And so we use this opportunity to give you an update on some of the important, or shall we say, more prioritized areas of work that the organization has been looking after in the last 6 months mainly. We do many, many things, as you know, but it's important to give you a small highlight. So in this next, it is 20 minutes, though we're supposed to have 30, so we'll see how we manage. I'll give you first a quick overview. So Ryan, if you could kindly move to the next slide for me, please. I wanted to remind you of the vision and mission of RDA, because all of this comes back to this. So we are, our very ambitious vision is that researchers and innovators openly share and reuse data across technologies, disciplines and countries to address the grand challenges of society. And we'll hear a little bit more about how we address the grand challenges through the Sustainable Development Goals piece and the agricultural data piece later on in the session. That vision, of course, the mission to achieve that vision is that we build these social and technical bridges to enable that. And we have, as you know, this slide on the side. This, by the way, comes from the nutshell slides that the Secretariat produce and make available on the About RDA tab every month. And so everyone is free to use the slides and see the latest statistics. Yeah. In the next slide, I think, so that's really about the organization. Ryan, if you could move on to the next one for me. Right, so just for the purposes of this presentation and also for the purposes of all of the activities that are performed by the Research Data Alliance, we often talk about the work and the business of RDA. So the work of RDA is, of course, what all of you do. It's the heart of the organization. It's the volunteer community all coming together in the different groups and in different activities. Yeah, the business is this very lean and agile managerial layer to support that, to ensure that we have a governance and operations and to secure the organization's sustainability. You know? And we call all of that, if you like, the RDA platform, not just in terms of the web platform, but actually more of a platform. So in the next slide, we have, so obviously, like all organizations, we have different phases of our life, and we started in 2013, and that was really the inception phase, if you like, up until 2015. And then the different phases covered the direction, we had a roadmap, and now we're in consolidation. So in 2020, last year, the council, together with then the community, because we put the strategic plan that was developed last year in 2020 for a good number of months out for community consultation. We presented it in many different pieces, including in the last plenary, and now we have published a final version on the report. So after, of course, the strategic plan, which is quite an ambitious one, comes implementation. And on the next slide, you'll be able to see the strategic plan, and I invite you to go and have a look at it, is basically structured into 3 macro areas: people, processes, and products. And they're the 3 different, and they all have sub priorities and specific goals. Many of them overlap, but they encompass all the different areas of the Research Data Alliance and plans to grow and to sustain the community. After this strategic plan was presented to the community and finalised with Council, the Secretariat worked on the implementation priorities, which you can see on the next slide. And we chose the implementation priorities for 2021 based on our resources available, the activities that were already ongoing, and the different areas, if you like, that we felt being realistic we could implement and work towards in 2021. I will remind you that there are 6 people on the Secretariat in addition to myself, and in addition to the priorities that we have chosen, the daily operations of the organisation must continue. So the 3 areas are financial sustainability, so obviously ensuring that the organisation continues to operate, and also to provide not just the existing services, but improve them for the community. Regional engagement is also a very important priority for us, because we want to be truly global, and there are still many areas around the world where we are not we don't have as strong a community as we do in others. There are many reasons behind that. I won't go into it now, but so regional engagement is a big priority for us. And finally, the platform as a business model. So to offer to the community and all of the stakeholders, the different landscape, and the groups collaborate and things like that. So obviously to turn this, make this, if you say, virtual RDA community into a more sustainable and a more structured activity. And in the last slide of my presentation, before I hand over, so of course those implementation priorities, as you say, are significant ones. I mentioned the staff resources that we have, so it's quite a low number of people, and I have 6 staff members, but they don't all work full time for the Secretariat, just 2 do. So obviously to look towards the consolidation of the organization during this particular period, the council decided that it's very important, the financial aspects of RDA, and so a financial sustainability task force was set up in late last year. We kept it a small group, and you will hear a little bit more about it now, but the members come from regional offices. We have a regional office in the US, which is headed by Rebecca Koskela. She's the executive director. We have a recently set up last year a European legal entity, and Natalie Harrer is our representative of that office. And in addition to myself, we have 3 members of council who are supporting this. So I'm going to pass over to Natalie now, who will give you insights into the work of the Sustainability Task Force, and we'll come back then and have a little discussion with Natalie and Rebecca afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilary. Can people hear me? Can you give me a little thumbs up there? Good stuff. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. So I think, Ryan, if you can just stop sharing yours. Okie doke. Okay, and okay, I hope everybody can see that, because now I can't see anything. I can't see the chat anymore. So if you can't hear or see my slides, then somebody from the Secretariat intervene with your voice. Thanks so much for the introduction, Hilary. So you know my connection to RDA, but in my other day job, I'm director of the Digital Repository of Ireland. So I'm coming to you from not so sunny Dublin this morning. And because I can't picture anyone, which is really tough, I've just decided that you're all wearing Scottish tartan kilts and stuffing your faces with shortbread, not with haggis. I don't really want to picture that this early in the morning. So that's the picture that I have in my mind, and I will move on in my slides. So my task this morning is to talk to you about the financial sustainability side that Hilary mentioned. And I think that the fantastic and rich keynote from Jenny Tennyson set us up well for this, because she talked about the importance of sustainability in organizations. So we're going to take a deep dive as much as we can in about 15 minutes into this morning. So before I get started on the details, when we talk about financial sustainability, we're talking about that of the RDA Foundation, the legal entity. So this is a not-for-profit charitable organization that was established in 2014 in the UK, and it's the official and legal representative of the global RDA community. So the Secretariat time and the business operations of RDA, which Hilary just described so well, are taken care of underneath this foundation. It does the business so that you can do the work of the RDA, which takes place through all the working groups, the interest groups, during plenaries and all around the year. The foundation employs a Secretary General and an office manager, so that's just 2 staff. And then elected council members are trustees and board members of the foundation. So this is what we're talking about when it comes to looking for financial sustainability. So now what I'll show you is an overview of the income streams, where have the finances come from, and how has the organization grown over time in relation to those finances, trying to provide a very sort of fast but fairly detailed overview of where things are at. Because you know, RDA is now what we could consider a mature organization, which is a very exciting and fantastic achievement. But when things mature, they often have to change their model. And that's the stage that we're at now, and that's what we're looking at in the Financial Sustainability Task Force, which has been meeting weekly for the last couple of months and starting to do the desk research to figure out where things are at. Okay, so here is a very beautiful, clearly I'm an art school graduate, slide that gives an indication of some of the income streams, or the main income streams that we have had for the last number of years in RDA. And the proportions are relatively accurate here. So the largest amount of funding has come from donations and grants. And when we talk about this big orange box, really what we're talking about is the original seed funding that was provided by the US, the European, and the Australian funding agencies. This really allowed RDA to get off the ground. It supported a fantastic range of programs and the plenaries over time. And it's been absolutely not just foundational, but fundamental to RDA's growth. Then we also have organizational membership fees that come from those that join the organizational assembly and have a voice there. Also a very important income stream, not as large as the donations have been to this point. And then some other ad hoc financial contributions. These all go into this thing that we call RDA Global, or the RDA Foundation. But how do they go in? Well, in fact, it's only about 5% of the total funding agency investment, that big orange block, that actually goes to the RDA Foundation. Now, from an administrative overhead perspective, this is a fantastic achievement because it's so small. But because it's so small, it's not that much money in the end. And this is what we're looking to sustain in different kinds of ways. So those are some of the income streams that we've seen over the last number of years. But what's been happening over that time is a really exponential growth in the size of RDA and the activities that RDA facilitates by all of the work that you sitting there in your kilts in the Edinburgh Auditorium work on. So when we started, there were just about 1,000 individual members that had signed up and were active in RDA. Over time, that has grown, plateaued a little bit because of the pandemic, like everything else. But now we're over 11,500 individuals. That's a huge growth over that period of time, and I think quite incomparable to many other organizations. The organizational growth, these are the organizations that belong to the organizational assembly. They pay a fee to be part of that and to contribute actively through their organizational hats to the work of RDA. This has grown as well, but it's sort of leveled off over the last number of years, and it's something that we would like to build, certainly as RDA goes forward. Over that same period of time, there's been a huge growth in the work that happens. So back when we had around 1,000 members at the very beginning in 2013, 17 plenaries ago, there were 14 working and interest groups. There are now 133, again, massive. There have been 50 recommendations and supporting outputs released and endorsed, and the Secretariat and the Foundation provide a lot of support for this to happen. And over 140 cases of adoption in that time period as well. So we should all take a moment to sort of like pat our own backs here, because this is a really great output. But of course, coming back to the sustainability side of things, all of this work needs to be managed, it needs to be supported and maintained. So on to looking at the actual numbers. A picture of the finances. We decided to focus on the last few years to give the most accurate recent picture of where we're at for comparative purposes. Hilary mentioned that there are 6 people working to support the RDA global work from the Secretariat, and but that they're not 6 full-time people. So if you look at the total in-kind staff there, these are in-kind contributions to the Secretariat. Incredibly important. They make it possible for us to be here today, all staring into our screens and wishing that we were actually together in person. But as you can see from the numbers, 2.533, they have stayed, that number has stayed fairly steady over the last number of years. Whereas if you compare to the previous slides I just showed you, the work of the organization, the size of it has grown significantly in that time period. In addition to this, Since May 2020, the foundation has had to take over running the web platform, because before that was covered by some of that big orange square, those foundation grants. So that's a big extra piece of work. And we all know the website is massive and comprehensive and incredibly useful and sometimes frustrating. So it's a big piece of work there to do that. Okay, financially, what's coming into the foundation? Well, organizational membership fees over the last 3 years have gone up slightly, but that's between 70,000 to 80,000 pounds over that 3-year period. So not a huge growth. A very important source of income, but not enough to run the whole ship. And these are in pounds because the UK is where the legal entity is. And if we compare this and look at not just those organizational fees, which are the blue bar here, but also the rest of the income, this is a picture of the last 3 years and what you can see changing over time. A key thing to point out again is that orange bar. It looks pretty healthy. So when you look at this picture, you think, all right, that's a decent amount of funding. The issue is that, as I said before, this orange bar represents what we call the original seed funding that went into build the RDA in the beginning. We no longer can rely on those funds in the same way. There's a significant change happening after the end of this year to those funds. So that is why we have to look at different kinds of revenue streams or changing the revenue streams to make up a model that is financially sustainable. If we look at a comparison of income versus expenditure in that same 3-year period, you can see that sometimes the expenditure goes higher than the income. That's because we have a little bit of a reserve in the foundation, but that reserve is being cut into, and you really don't want to do that on an ongoing basis. That's not sustainable. That's meant to be for emergencies, like not necessarily like the pandemic, but we know what it's like when suddenly something happens that you weren't anticipating. Okay, so I'm going to start to sum up in the next couple of slides here. The points that I really want to get across to everyone today are the following. RDA is growing. It has been growing. It's been growing at an exciting pace, at a pace we all should very much be proud of. But the income needs to keep pace. And the original model that we had, that original seed funding that provided a huge input and the ability to get things going and to build it to what we have today, is no longer in place in the same way. So what we need to do is we need to grow our existing income streams. We need to establish new income streams towards finding a sustainable funding model. And many of us on the Financial Sustainability Task Force, and I'm sure many of you sitting there in your kilts this morning, know that this is a challenging thing to do. But what I want to really emphasize here is that this is happening because of the growth of RDA. And the growth of RDA is due to its success. And that success is due to the time that you as members have invested in RDA. So we're at a place that we have built. We've built it together. And now we need your input and your energy to help the financial model mature to fit the organization's maturity. So let's get down to the numbers exactly. What does RDA Global need annually? Well, on a core basis, a sort of systemic amount that we can rely on, the foundation needs about 400,000 pounds. That's not really a huge number. And in fact, to operate an organization like this, that's incredibly efficient. From my personal perspective, I think that's incredibly efficient, but we don't have it at this point, and that's what we're trying to find. This will support personnel salaries, travel, significant fiscal expenses to run the foundation, and then other costs like the web platform, keeping some bank reserve. It would also be nice on the right side column there to have a bit more to be able to build other activities. So, we've had awards and scholarships and grants to help people get to the plenaries, to kick off some of the working groups. We've had those kinds of funds. We really should increase the global personnel if we want to reach the potential that we have. So that would be nice funding to have. But, we're looking at the strictly necessary plus what we can look forward to in the future. And of course, the regional grants that we've been working on that underlie global contributions are fundamental to maintaining and growing the community. So if you have any connections in those areas, go tap them. What could a possible global funding model look like from 2022 forward? And that's next year, by the way, which is now only, 8 months away. We will have some of the same sources coming in different proportions than we have in the past. Those are the three beautiful, colorful boxes on the left-hand side. But then we are also looking to how we can change, grow, or add other income streams. So one of the things that we're doing is we are looking at individual membership fees. This has not existed before. And I can say very, very honestly, this has been a huge discussion in the Financial Sustainability Task Force, but all through different levels of RDA governance and membership over the years. Not necessarily something that everyone is happy to introduce, because of course we really want to keep RDA open. But open has two meanings to it, right? Or at least two that I can think of right now. Open means accessible, transparent, available to everyone. But open also means open for business, and we have to do that part in order to keep the other open and transparent and accessible part. Sponsorship funding we're looking into, and other kinds of ad hoc sources, and also how we may adapt the plenary financial model to bring more funding into the organization. Remember, this is still a charity, not for profit. Nobody's trying to get rich here. We're just trying to keep the thing running so that it can all feed into RDA Global. So the focus and the method of this task force really is to identify appropriate and achievable income streams to fund RDA Global in order to adequately support the work. But the method is to make sure that this is done through wide consultation. We want to hear back from everyone. So we've already started that consultation process with the organizational assembly, TAB, co-chairs, and then today we're presenting it to you, the membership, and we have launched an individual membership survey so that you can find at bit.ly/RDA fees. It'll also be on the website. And I really encourage you and ask you to please take a look at that and fill it out. It'll take 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you do it with coffee, dipping your shortbread into the coffee. But it's really, really important to us to hear what you have to say here because we want this to work. And I'm coming to my end of my slides here. I'm not going to read through the cost of RDA, of not having RDA here, because I'm preaching to the converted. Everyone in the room today has found some reason why they want to be here and have returned, many of you, over all of these 17 plenaries. But we all know it's very important. And I guess all I want to say is that I want to appeal to everybody's creativity, ideas, and the investment that you've put in so far to try to take us forward in financial sustainability for the future. Okay, here's the timeline. We're at part 2 right there, stakeholder consultation. And then we will try to play out the rest of this over the years so that we can implement the new model in the beginning of 2022. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, and I will ask Hillary and Rebecca to please join in. Was everything okay? Everybody heard?
Yep.
Great, yeah. Thanks so much, Natalie, for that very excellent overview of the situation. I welcome Rebecca, and thank you. Rebecca's in New Mexico, so for those of you who know your episodes and time zones, you will realize that Rebecca's joining us in the middle of her night, so thank you for that. So just quickly, because I appreciate that we are starting to eat into the time of the other session, we'll keep it brief, but I saw a lot of frightened faces coming up. The point of this little quick discussion between Rebecca, Natalie and myself is to try and give you a little understanding of where we are going and the many different aspects. So Rebecca, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about what's going on so far, in addition to Natalie?
Yes. So one of the first things that the task force did was to make sure that the current financial situation and documents have been updated. And those are on the website under the RDA Foundation tab. So you can see those there. And next, we looked at what we wanted to investigate. So the individual membership model, reviewing the organizational membership model, and looking at the affiliate membership, and as was in the previous slides, sponsorship and plenary. So for each of these, we are comparing them to existing organizations, so we have some background, and we've created different scenarios and a quick model that we can use to try out these different things. In addition to seeing how much money they could provide, we also look to see what the cost is to do that, because that's also important. And we've also, as was said, we're doing consultations. So the tab and co-chairs meet either at the plenary, before the plenary, and with virtual ones, we've started doing before the plenary and after the plenary. So we have some really good feedback from the tab and co-chairs. And the first of that was it's very important to stay true to the vision, mission of RDA. And if there is, and as surprised emotions, it's also important that if we do have an individual membership, it is very important to have a tiered membership so that we don't have people who can't join in. Because it's a global organization, sometimes it's easier for the companies to support registration fees. Some countries you can have your membership covered. Other countries, like in the US, most of the time you cannot cover membership, so it's up to the individuals. So it was good to get their feedback, and there will be more feedback coming in from the tab and co-chairs at the meeting after the plenary.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Natalie, you are working with Ingrid, isn't that right, on the organizational aspects. So would you just give them a quick update on that?
Yeah, really briefly. We, as Rebecca said, we did some of the desk research. We took a look at what the current organizations that are part of the assembly are paying. Thought about, if you were to increase those fees a bit, what would you get? And it would help, but it wouldn't solve the entire financial sustainability issue on its own. So what we did is we reviewed other organizations' models. There's different ways that things are tiered. Some are based on size of, like number of employees, some are on GDP. So we have to keep looking into that, and we've asked the organizational assembly for 2 volunteers. I think we got 7, so there's a lot of interest there, which is great. And we have to look into that. And part of that process, it's not just about the money, it's about what does the money get you, in a sense, right? So the organizational assembly has been quite clear that they find real benefits to being involved in the OA. And if there's to be a change in the fee structure, or if we're trying to recruit additional organizations. So if you're out there, by the way, representing an organization and you think you can get them to join, this is the moment to start talking to that person. But the benefits need to be clear, and they need to be transparent. And one of the key things we got from the OA is, please do consult us. Please ask for our feedback and keep doing that, right? So you don't want to scare the membership around financial issues, but let's face it, organizations have to deal with this sort of thing all the time. So let's just get as many heads together as we can, and solve the issue. Fully believe we can.
Thanks, Natalie. Okay, so I'm going to sort of wrap it up now. I did like to say 2 things about the individual membership survey. It'll be open for a month. It's anonymous, but we would do ask you, so don't be logged in when you're completing it, please. You can do that, but we're not interested in who answers, we're interested in your answers. Please take some time. All models are being assessed. We also, by the way, presented the financial situation together with the forecasts for the next years to the Funders Forum. And so all of the stakeholders are being involved. The task force will meet again next week, and we got some good insight yesterday as well in the unconference about community involvement that could feed into this, and we will make sure that you are kept up to date, and we will interact with you. But please use your opportunity to give us the feedback, because we often don't get huge responses to surveys, and this is really crucial, as I said yesterday morning, to determine the future of the organization. So I will move on to the next session, because we've now run over time and cut into 10 minutes into theirs. So thank you, Rebecca and Natalie, again, for supporting the work of the task force. Again, it's all volunteer people, so these people are doing it from the goodness of their heart and from their love and passion for the Research Data Alliance. Thank you so much. Right, on to, but of course, there are, work goes on, and there are many, many things happening. And of course, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are quite a, a very important piece of work that were launched in 2015, I believe. You'll see that on the next slide. But how, clearly that, from a funding perspective, by the way, that's a very important thing if we can show as well that RDA is supporting sustainable development goals. But let's move back a little bit to remember what the vision of RDA is: to solve the grand challenges of society. So our job, or our aim, or our mission, or our vision is to support, to provide these solutions, across disciplines, interoperability, all the fair aspects, to solve the grand challenges of society. So as you can see on the slide there are 17 sustainable development goals, and you can click the links and that on them, all covering very many different grand challenges. Ryan, if you move on to the next slide for one moment, so what are they about? So some people understand them, and then you hear SDGs, SDGs, SDGs. It's Sustainable Development Goals, and in September 2015, this common vision on transforming our world and creating a 2030 agenda for sustainable development was brought up. And in just tomorrow, so it will be 5 years ago tomorrow, that they were ratified at the UN headquarters in New York, and 193 countries from across the world committed to the goals. Yes, so these Sustainable Development Goals call upon all parts of our society, private, civil, and governments, to join together to create this more sustainable world for 2030. And what you'll hear about in the next session, in this session, is how is the Research Data Alliance and the work going on in that supporting these Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that's my last slide, isn't it, Ryan? And I pass to...
That's right, yeah. Thanks,
to introduce
Hilary,
the session.
perfect.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Hilary and Natalie and Rebecca, for the presentation so far. And so I'll invite Edith Herzog to the stage first, who will put just the work of the RDA Sustainable Development Goals interest group in a bit more context. And then we'll also hear from the other co-chairs of the group following that. So Edith, I'll ask you to turn on your mic and camera. There we go, I see you.
So thanks very much, Ryan and Hilary, to start this session, and congratulations in my role as member of the finance. That counts important numbers for the RDA. That really what Natalie and the task force is doing is about increasing the opportunity for the RDA. Sorry, I had to make this small statement. So half hour we discussed that how we wish to into the RDA groups and RDA bodies. And I'm not alone here. RDA is a voluntary organization, very much bottom-up organization, very much member-driven organization, and the council is just provide the oversight. So based on that philosophy and on that practice of the RDA, I asked the best expert on SDGs within our RDA community, liked and respected by the members, Lindsay, Ingwill, Anthony, and Devika, who are intergroup within the RDA to make this session more practical than the council. So can we go to the next slide, please? Maybe to introduce this slide a bit. Hilary mentioned in the previous part of the presentation that RDA new strategy is available from January on. It has 3 sessions: the people, the products, and of course we have the 4P, which is the purpose, our vision, and our mission. Page 2. So if we are talking about the SDGs and we think incorporate SDGs to our work, then of course the first thing is that can we align the RDA vision and mission with the SDG goals and targets. And when you read it, it's very much so. It's so much actually that when many years ago in 2015, I thought that RDA is one of the SDG evangelists already that time. So it took a time to get there, that mission, our purpose is aligned with the SDGs. We had not to change it, and we discussed the strategy session. So then what we have to do then, of course, to make sure that our people and our products are absolutely ready to make RDA the organization. This is our goal with the SDGs, to support and to brand RDA as an organization. We cannot start with the people and we cannot start with the products. We have to start with the process. We have to make sure that within our everything that the UN SDG goals will be done. Why will be it easier than we think? Because when you read carefully the UN SDGs, it's all about excellent data management. And the challenges that the process within the UN is kind of slowly, and after 5 years, they are calling for action, exactly because the interoperability and the measurement of the data makes it so difficult. And as we all know, without measurements, we cannot move forward. Can I ask for the next slide, please? So what we want to do, increase the awareness of the SDGs across the RDA bodies, RDA working groups, RDA interest groups, and around the RDA individual members with the high data, and our members will increase in their own organizations, because the RDA is just nice but very small part of everyone's life. So we hope that we will be a kind of accelerator SDGs to support it indirectly on that way, that when our members are going back to their also stand for SDGs even in their organizations. So we wish to align the RDA business and the work with the SDGs. Both for Ryan and Mary to put their significant effort from the Secretariat, from the very scarce resources, by the way, to support this process and to think or to. So we wish to implement SDGs as part of the RDA vision and mission. We wish to get the SDGs as a business as usual for RDA and not as a special activity. So what we like to do, we wish to review and screen the organization and to align the SDGs to the RDA daily work, to the existing working groups and interest group, to the existing outputs, to review the outputs and make sure that that our outputs have that they will drive the attention of those who wish to use the outputs to the direction of the field they are interested most. We also wish to label, of course, the use cases, and we wish to push for use cases which are most relevant for the challenges, which is the basic RDA mission. And definitely, we wish to consider the SDGs in our future work proactively. So in the future, I do hope when we are wonderful BOF meetings and the wonderful agenda where the different RDA communities wish to work, they will come with the idea and they come with the short description of which SDGs they would support most. RDA Council will progress as part of the strategy implementation, as well the Secretariat. But again, closure of the presentation, because we are a community organization, we cannot do it with our members. So I'm very, very thankful SDG for the organization and the community to help them be a kind of help desk, be a consultancy, internal consultancy for everybody else, that how they can do this job better. Last sentence, I'd like to turn to the very valuable presentation of the interest group by Ingvild, Anthony, and Lindsay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edith. So yeah, we'll invite the co-chairs to the stage. Again, I will be in control of the slides. So I think it's yourself, Lindsay, up first.
Yeah, that's right. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Again, as always, just give me a shout when you want to move on to the next slide. I think we're slightly over time at the moment, so
yeah, so we're gonna hopefully go relatively quickly and just give everybody a sense of what the interest group has been working on. So I'm Lindsay Barberi. I'm one of the co-chairs with the RDA for Sustainable Development Goals Interest Group, which we've been an interest group since October 2019. Although a lot of work has happened, before that and swirling around that time and into the present. Thank you to Edith, Council, and Secretariat for all this focus and attention and support and opportunity, really, to engage with the RDA community around the Sustainable Development Goals. So myself and co-chairs are just going to give, as I said, a brief overview of some of the work our interest group has been doing, and just give you all sort of the names and voices to connect with going forward. As we are excited to engage with the RDA community broadly and to support Council and interest group and working group chairs to engage with the RDA, to engage with the SDGs. So co-chairs Ingvild will give a summary of engagement, very brief. Anthony will share how we have been working to connect interest group, working group outputs, activities, and adoption stories to the SDGs. Vivica will share on work to build a semantic infrastructure to help collect and store RDA linkings to SDGs. And in general, we just want to invite all communication and hope to really work with everyone, all the RDA community, in aligning with the SDGs. And we'll be having an open call next Wednesday, April 20th, to talk more. So details to come. But with that, we'll go on to Ingvild.
So Ingvild, if you can unmute your microphone and turn on your camera if possible. Sorry, Ingvild, I see in the chat here you might be having some issues with connection.
Yeah, perhaps we'll give her one more moment, but in the interest of time, I can just briefly maybe summarize those slides. So actually, if you go back one slide.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so just to, I guess, just a quick summary, this was a survey of the SDG alignment with interest group members. And the aim was to really get feedback. So as an interest group, we gathered feedback on other groups' alignment with the SDGs. So next slide. I think sort of the main takeaway here was that although we had sort of limitations and kind of a lower response rate, that we did have a really wide range of sort of disciplines and focuses and external partners that were really highlighted in the responses to that survey, ranging from, health, education, bioinformatics, and food, ran the gambit of ways to align with the SDGs within the RDA community. So that was work we already had and ways that we already feel like the organization and RDA members are already really aligning well with the SDGs. So sort of a great first step, but we know that there needs to be more engagement. So with that, maybe Anthony can show how we were connecting outputs particularly.
Yeah, sure thing. If you want, go ahead and move to the next slide. But I also just want to give a shout out to all of my fellow co-chairs. You'll hear from Devika. It's unfortunate with virtual connections and such, but I do also want to make sure Ingvild has provided an immense amount of leadership expertise and management throughout the entire history of this group. So I do want to make sure that her contributions do not go unnoticed. She's been immensely important to this work. So I hope that she can join, and you'll hear from her during our Mentimeter and kind of feedback session. But I just want to make sure that her work is highly recognized. She's as well as all co-chairs have been really invaluable. So thank you all for attending. And thank you all for providing your time to hear about our work, and we look forward to hearing some feedback from you all. So as mentioned, we are mapping RDA activities to the SDG goals to demonstrate the impacts RDA outputs and recommendations could have in the collection and management of the SDG targets and indicators. To briefly demonstrate this work, I'll walk. And this slide in particular is really focused on goal 3 of good health and well-being. As you can see, there are multiple RDA outputs and groups addressing directly the goal of global health and well-being, all with specialized areas of focus and impact. You can see those groups listed at the top right of your screen in that box at the top. The community of experts across these groups could provide invaluable insights towards addressing the associated technology and information needs for monitoring and achieving the SDG of good health and well-being, as well as multiple aligned goals such as life on land and water and climate change. For a bit of context into how the SDGs operate, to ensure SDGs are monitored and measured appropriately, each SDG is operationalized through underlying targets and indicators. In the case of goal 3, these include monitoring multiple population disease incidence rates, as well as improving population social determinants of health, such as access to clean living conditions and removal from poverty. Obviously, each of these indicators face in order to effectively collect the necessary monitoring data, as well as make that data fair. So to focus in a bit, I'd like us to look at target 3.b of the SDGs, which is to support the research and development of vaccines and medicines for the communicable and non-communicable diseases that primarily affect developing countries. In monitoring this, the UN and affiliate parties will be monitoring several indicators, including the proportion of a population that's vaccinated, assistance to medical research and basic health sectors, as well as the proportion of health facilities with relevant essential medicines made available and affordable. So obviously, the RDA COVID Working Group provides multiple data management guidelines that align directly with this target. At the population level, the output provides guidance on how to ethically and reliably monitor data to track and moderate the spread of infectious pandemics. And at the clinical level, it provides guidance on how to manage data ethically and interoperably in the production of more effective and affordable drugs. In addition, it supports not only researchers, but also funders and policymakers in how to best support the value of information infrastructure in addressing global disease challenges. This is a clear alignment of needs wherein this output could be of use to inform the monitoring advancement of the SDG target, and I think we should see how we could further communicate this and support it and demonstrate this value. Next slide, please. So enhancing, as you've heard already, enhancing the global infrastructure for research and access to information is central to multiple SDG goals. And fortunately, the UN has recognized the necessities of improved data infrastructure and research sharing in multiple of their SDG goals and targets, thus providing many avenues for RDA's value to be demonstrated. The examples in this slide are not exhaustive. There's multiple areas in which we overlap and align. But let's briefly look at goal 9 and goal 17. There are multiple alignments across the community central to enhancing the sustainability, ethicality, and accessibility of research technology and infrastructure for increased knowledge sharing, as highlighted in that target 9.5. From ensuring the sustainability and interoperability of underlying infrastructures to the exposure of machine-readable data management policies governing the data residing within those repositories. In addition, the RDA has a long-standing history of successful, mutually beneficial, internationally collaborative partnerships wherein external organizations develop and/or test outputs addressing the grand challenges of research and information infrastructure, thus aligned highly with Target 17.6. So these range from legal and rights protections, such as care and trust principles, which could be crucial to informing how Indigenous rights can be protected as data is collected surrounding the SDGs. SDGs to ensuring the exchange of fair data, such as the fair data maturity model in Scotland, have been widely adopted and provide a lot of positive feedback. So I want to provide, just in quick summation, the main takeaways we'd like you to get from this time here is that this work is ongoing across the RDA. Multiple of you are already directly supporting the SDGs. It just may not be highly apparent. What we aim to do is to analyze existing and future points of impact these outputs could have for the SDGs, and discover means to best communicate this value for the value of the RDA for addressing the SDGs, as it provides a powerful source to support the reach, impact, and sustainability of the RDA. So with that, I'll turn it over to Devika in the sense of time to discuss the tools that for systematizing this mapping and alignment. Thank you all.
Apologies, Devika, your microphone is muted.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Okay, I am Devika Madali, one of the co-chairs of the RDA for SDGs IG. And today, in view of the time, I'll be going like a bullet train through the slides because there's very little time left. But I would like to present on the concept of onto SDG, a work that I have taken up to map in general work going on which are related to UN SDGs for the UN. And today I will discuss how this onto SDG work is being adopted for to represent the outputs and recommendations of RDA. So as Anthony just presented, Anthony has done wonderful work so far trying to map the outputs and recommendations of taking the outputs, outcomes and recommendations of our different WGs and IGs and showing the value, how they relate to different goals and what targets. And he started the mapping a while back, and that's wonderful work. But then we started wondering that if we do the work, whether we are really representing what the group means by that outcome or recommendation or not. And we wonder whether we should get a direct input. We should get the groups themselves to give the inputs rather than we try to map. This is just another approach. When that was being discussed, it came to my mind that I use the ontology approach to get the input. So that's my presentation right here. Onto SDG presents a semantic infrastructure for representation of the UN SDGs, their targets and indicators, through which it is it enables linking the goals with the respective projects, initiatives, labs, whatever they are, groups of people, organization, researchers. As I said, we started this work about 8 to 9 months back for UN SDGs per se. At that time, it was not necessarily for the outcomes and recommendations of RDA. It was for any to represent and to be able to interlink any project that would be feeding into any of the SDGs. Per se. The end objective, of course, is the semantic analysis of data. Once we have a sizable data in there from the different groups globally, we'll be able to make a lot of semantic analysis out of the data and also assess the extent of implementation and the impact of SDGs themselves. Next slide, please. So that's how it looks. It's a system in production right now. This is the adaptation for RDA, which is going on. Next slide, please. Yeah, at the highest level, we model the classes. There are 9 classes we have chosen, but the most important for the discussion over here are the goals, the targets, and the indicators themselves, and of course the working group and the interest group that we want to model and their outcomes. Next slide, please. So for example, if you take the class goal is represented like that. We use at the moment a simple instance of web protege, but it's also on my system running on my own server also. For the work that is going on and for demonstration purpose, we use the web version. The goal is has the instances of 17 SDGs. Yeah, please go ahead. And within each SDG will be the target. The target class itself we'll have the particular targets linked to each SDG. Okay. Go ahead, please. And inside the target class will be the indicator classes. And of course, we define the data properties for them, what kind of data is expected to go into the target. Go ahead, please. Yeah, for example, if you take SDG 13, I'm not sure whether you can see the whole thing on your screen, whether it's expanded. It's a SDG 13 is divided into these targets, maybe 5, and then indicators. So this is the basis, the why we started off the Onto SDG work was that there are 17 SDGs. There are 169 targets in all, and then they lead to about 247 indicators. And if any individual researcher wants to go through the whole documentation to find exactly where they relate to this SDG, that could be a huge task. And they might not have a clue at all reading the whole UN document as it's presented. So our view was to give a very systematic, organized, structural way of representing the whole SDG and then allowing them interaction into that structure so that they can enter the system at the point that they where they relate to it. That was the objective. So please go ahead. Go ahead, please. Again, yeah. It is better seen in the schema over here. As you can see, we have represented the main thing is the goal, and within that the targets and the indicators. On the right hand side, you can see we map it to the WGIG, the concerned WGIG. We also have a note of metadata where we collect some simple metadata for the working group and interest group. For example, it could be the name of the working group, the interest group, the title of the outcome or recommendation they're talking about, the keywords that describe it, the domain it belongs to, and certain these things go into the metadata. And then it is linked to the particular goal through what we call publication at the moment, but publication is really the outcome of the recommendation of that WG. Please go ahead. So that is the view of 17 SDGs. That's how they will be fanned out and mapped within the system. Yeah, you can go ahead, please. Yeah, go ahead, please. I prefer to skip this in view. Okay, all that looked very simple, no? A little scary, I agree. What is she going on showing us is ontology modeling work? Do we have to do modeling now? No, you don't have to do. That's the good news I have. We have a simple onto SDG input interface through which we will solicit input from the WG and IG chairs or whoever they nominate. All they have to do is interact with such a form and provide the input like we have asked over here. Please go ahead. One more. Yeah, as you can see, it is just a drop down a list of domains as they are already enlisted in the RDA domains. So people are free to pick up with the radio buttons, whichever domains are applicable to their outcome, and then go ahead and pick up the SDG that is relevant to their work. We know that one outcome or the work of one WG may be related to more than one SDG. So we will give an interactive workflow where they can pick up more than one SDG and then say that we are related to this and that. Please go ahead. And yes, go ahead again. So that's I wanted to show that we will just solicit all the input through a very simple interface like this. And we do hope that you, the members, will give a few minutes of your valuable time to give our inputs when we are ready. I must say that this system as we speak is still in production. And the production system, I hope, will be up in 4 weeks' time, and we will communicate through the website when it's ready, the beta is ready, and we will solicit your input at that time. So that's all I had to say. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Devika.
I was going to say, Ryan, I know we have the Mentimeter survey. Is that still, do we have time for that? Is that?
I think we do, yeah. So there's obviously a section here now for the Mentimeter poll and for the Q&A. I think, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been as much questions in the chat box. So I think we can just go ahead to the Mentimeter poll, and if anyone has any questions, please submit them to the in the Q&A box, and I'm sure our presenters will be able to sort of respond in line in text if that's all okay. So what I'll do is I'll ask people, can they please go to menti.com and and enter the code 90520986. And that there's a handful of questions that the SDG interest group has set up for us in advance. So just bear with me 1 second, and I will change to the Mentimeter poll, so that the code will go off the screen for a second, but it'll be back on when I have the Mentimeter
Wonderful
on the screen.
And maybe as we're doing this, Ryan, I just want to give just to frame this, these are just a short series of 3 questions, and will help ourselves and RDA Council sort of get a snapshot of all the members' sort of interest and alignment with RDA. So this would be a really helpful, sort of hopefully fun, interactive way to get a quick idea of where people are aligning. So thank you.
Perfect, and I can see there's already a lot of results coming in. So I'll ask as well any of the other co-chairs if they would like to sort of comment on the results as they appear. You can turn on your mics and cameras as well. Maybe it might be a bit easier for our audience to see you. Obviously, I'm just looking at it now. There seems to be quite seeing that so the first question, I'll just call it out actually, just so everyone's clear. So outside of your RDA involvement, have you ever engaged with the UN SDGs in your everyday work? So that would be in your role as a researcher or in research support, as a policymaker or a funder, etc. So from what I can see here, there is the most prominent one so far anyway, out of the 70+ responses we have, is relevant but not addressed in everyday work. Do any of the SDG co-chairs want to sort of comment to that on that at all? How that aligns with any of the work they've done so far, or if this is news to them?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that really speaks to, I think, at least for a lot of experiences, yeah, relevant but not necessarily addressed. And I think that really points to the gap and the opportunity to start addressing that and connecting some of these ways that we know work is relevant and can be useful. So yeah, that's exciting to see.
Yeah, just to second that, how the work that even if it may not be actively incorporating your everyday work, a lot of the solutions and technology and knowledge that you're producing can be highly relevant. How can we support bringing that into supporting the grand challenge of the SDGs? So yeah.
Ryan, I'd like to come here as a council member. As I said, we wish to create RDA as a SDG-friendly organization, being an accelerator for the research organization, and to make SDGs in their own work relevant. So I'm not so, and it creates an opportunity for RDA members to be the leader in their organization to promote the SDGs, which none of the research organization can really set aside for a long term. So actually, you can build your career on the SDGs within your organization, and I think it's a good benefit for the members. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a really good point, I think. So I think with the results seem to have the responses to them seem to have sort of dried up for now. So we'll just move on to the next question. So that should now be appearing on your screen. Might be a little bit difficult to read, seeing as we've listed out the 17 SDGs here along the bottom. But again, so I'll just call it the question. So again, outside of your RDA involvement, which of the SDGs align with your specific areas of work? So you will be able to select up to 3 of the SDGs here. So obviously this will depend on people's familiarity with the SDGs. So a lot of you mightn't be as familiar with them as you might hope to be, or as you might like to be. But just based on the titles of them, it might be worth sort of seeing what your responses are. And just to let you know as well that the responses for this one are sort of segregated essentially on your on the results you gave in the first section, so we can kind of see the sort of cross section of the two two questions. So we can see here that just based on the results so far, the quality education, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and climate action as well are the 3 most prominent so far.
Yeah, and a good spread as well.
no poverty and zero hunger at the very beginning. There's only one response between them, which is, I'm not sure if that will, what that will tell us. Obviously, it's kind of a snap goal. Is anything kind of popping out to yourself, Lindsay, or to anyone else from the interest group that that'd like to comment on from the results coming in here?
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see, as Lindsay mentioned, that the spread on the zero hunger point, to see work that's been done from the agriculture community for weak data interoperability, and we've noticed a number of different alignments there. So maybe in discussion with more co-chairs, we can see how we might be either better align those, or how we can better understand that alignment. And so that would love to maybe speak to or discuss with everybody a bit more about that point. But it's also exciting to see the spread and the representation of multiple different communities.
I think that will.
Ryan, I'd like to add here, from the strategic perspective of the council, that one of the overarching direction of the council is to go to be truly global and to go to the territories of the earth where we are not yet so much present. And for me, this distribution a bit signals that we are better engaged and better embedded to the most developed countries, and a bit less to the less developed countries. So I think that we can use this chart very much also to our strategic planning and implementation of our goal to go to the South Hemisphere and to the countries which are just in the emerging stage, ready to grow, in Africa, ready to go in Latin America, ready to go in Central South Asia, etc. So yes, we do a lot for the zero hunger, but it's not very recognized in the community. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah, Ida, I think that leads nicely into the presentation that we'll have next from the recorded presentation from Cynthia, who is involved in the agricultural data interest group, and hopefully their work on the establishing the community of practice. So just for the sake of time, I'm afraid I'll have to move on to the final question of the three we have in the Mentimeter poll today. Again, thank you again for everyone's interactions this evening. We've had a lot of responses. So the final question again will be, so considering your involvement in the RDA, which of the SDGs do you think would be relevant to you? So again, this will apply to your involvement within the RDA. So as a co-chair, as a group member, just maybe as a first-time attendee, it'd be worth getting sort of a snapshot here of the SDGs that people think might be relevant to them. This question as well isn't segregated by the results you gave in the the answers you gave in the very first question as well. So this is just kind of very much the top line figure based on your RDA involvement.
And maybe while these answers are rolling in, I just want to invite everybody. Like I had mentioned before, we are having an open call. So the interest group, but we're hoping to get many members of the RDA community. So we're having an open call next Wednesday, April 28th at 2 p.m. UTC. And if you would like more information on that, you can just join the interest group, and we'll certainly have or connect with any one of us, and we can link you up with that Zoom link. So we're hoping to get even more discussion. Hopefully this is generating a lot of interest and discussion that we can talk about next week as well. So.
Exactly, yeah. And just to reiterate, yeah, people will be able to join the interest group via the RDA page. So just search out you can browse the interest groups and join once you're logged into the RDA site. So yeah, again, just interesting sort of results coming in here. So the most prominent one so far that I'm seeing is the quality education, which I guess stands to reason, seeing there's a lot of people here involved in sort of training and skills development for around data curation. Also, obviously, climate action as well, which I think, obviously, hopefully very important to everyone.
Ryan, but I think that the quality education here is much larger than the school. Yeah, so quality education of the farmers to make a better yield, it's just part of it. Quality education of the RDA membership on the SDG goal is part of quality education. Yeah, so the education here is a larger term than just the schools, and I'd like to underline it here. And I think this is why it has got the most vote. And now I'm very happy that the next session will be about the future, something starting now in RDA with already the SDGs embedded.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that's also a very useful segue into the next section. So again, I will just stop sharing my screen. So thanks everyone for contributing to the Mentimeter poll so far. And again, if you have any questions to the either of the first presentation from Natalie, Hilary, and Rebecca, you can please fire those questions into the Q&A. And same with the presentation we just had from the SDG interest group and from Edith. Please include your questions there in the Q&A. I'm going to have to move on, and we're obviously a very stretched for time at the moment. So I'll ask my colleague Alexandra, who has the video of Cynthia's presentation, should hopefully have it loaded up. If you can share your screen, Alex, you should be able to share the video. I'm seeing that on screen perfectly. So this video is about 15 or 16 minutes long. I'm afraid this is going to eat into our into the break following this session. If you have to leave, that's obviously that's fine. But if you could stick around and watch the video to the end, and if you have any questions, please pose them to the Q&A box, and Emma will be able to pick them up. Thanks again for bearing with us, and apologies again for the slight delay with the schedule. But Alex, if you want to hit play, and if people can hear it, there's audio and everything. Once Alex hits play, just hit the thumbs up button, and we'll know we're good to go.
My name is Cynthia Parr, and I work at the National Agricultural Library, which is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Research Service. I'm speaking to you today as one of 3 co-chairs for EGAD, the Interest Group on Agricultural Data. My other 2 co-chairs are Patricia Bello-Bartin from Embrapa and Emma Subaratz from FAO. Because I'm not able to be with you in person today, or even virtually live because it's very early in my time, Emma will be with you virtually to answer any questions after the talk. I'll begin the talk by sharing some introduction about EGAD and telling you about some of our successes. However, we recognize that there are still some challenges and that there's a way that we could be even more successful. That is by transitioning to a new form of group in RDA called a community of practice. That way we can amplify the impact of RDA's activities. I'll provide 3 examples for how this might work and what may be in our roadmap. The third of these will be how our community of practice could contribute to the sustainable development goals that you've been hearing about in this session. EGAD was established in 2013 during plenary 2 of RDA, so we've been around a long time and are now a well-known space where members come together to discuss, collaborate, and promote recommendations. Members have come from the Americas, both North and South, from Africa, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. Because there's so much to talk about once a year, we've organized pre-meetings, usually about 1 or 2 days, prior to plenaries that are organized with local folks on the ground. And these have had up to 100 participants each. I'm showing here the 2 web pages where most of our information is disseminated. Over the years, our interest group has seen many successes. Some of these are training and capacity building opportunities focused, for example, in Latin America and in Africa. And in 2019, we recognized that were fantastic talks presented at the Helsinki meetings that had engaged people who were able to travel to Finland, but the people who were not able to travel were left out of those discussions. And so we organized a webinar series that essentially were repeat performances of those talks and scheduled them at global to reach other parts of the world. Most of the slide decks from our meetings are posted at Faculty of 1000 Research, and all of them have DOIs so they can be cited and reused. Through discussions in the EGAD community, several working groups have formed and produced outputs as listed here, and these are beginning to be adopted. You can see that there's an adoption story link there at the bottom. Now, not all of these groups were successful, and I'll talk a little bit about these challenges later. Participation in EGAD is generally quite high. We have over 260 registered members, and in the meeting that we organized virtually last year, which was about a 4-day-long event that happened after the plenary, we had over 350 people participating. And if you look just at the presenters, we had folks from 14 countries alone as presenters. However, it's clear that there's different levels of engagement that depends on institutions and their interests. And furthermore, there's logistical challenges, as I mentioned, bringing the Global South to RDA meetings. That's obviously different virtually. And while many key stakeholders in agricultural science are well represented, we know we could do more to promote the outputs of RDA in other communities. And we also know that there's many other organizations that we're not currently engaged with that we should be, both at national or international or particularly at regional scales. So let's look at what has explained our success so far. First of all, ag research is a focus of EGAD, but most ag researchers also engage with other domains, such as earth science or genetics. And that means it's a particularly well suited for the RDA model where those communities are also there at RDA. Our weak group interoperability working group was particularly successful because the membership of that group, the leadership of that group, came from already successful, already strong communities that were there before the working group existed. And at the same time, EGAD members always make a point to collaborate with other working groups in other communities. And overall, that means that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we like to take good ideas wherever they come from and adapt them for the agricultural context. So for these reasons, we're particularly interested in this new kind of organization within RDA, communities of practice. These are a new group in addition to working groups and interest groups and birds of a feather groups. They are to have a disciplinary focus, such as agriculture. They're to be particularly representative of the main discipline, including recognized institutions or associations. And so they're very intentional and not just a collection of folks who've joined by choice, but can actively seek out those that represent the main discipline. They should have a critical mass of group membership, more than 100 members. The community of practice will need to have letters of support that provide evidence that the community of practice will be valuable. And the group should have had created at least one working group and one set of recommendations endorsed. So by all these criteria, EGAD clearly is qualifies to be a community of practice. So obviously the goal of this new kind of group is similar to that of interest groups in that it's particularly important to build the discipline community and to share knowledge and develop those skills within that community. But in particular, it's all about designating the community of practice as a central coordinating point for that discipline. That means identifying those networks of experts and facilitating knowledge sharing within that domain. This is a natural role for EGAD, which has already developed those kinds of relationships with other communities of practice and networks and has already been working to ensure that we have an inclusive membership that includes particularly folks from the Global South. Let me illustrate with some diagrams how we see this working. To some extent, we're talking about EGAD serving as a hub to work with data experts from each of the communities represented in these larger circles. Global Open Data for Agricultural and Nutrition, GODAN, is a large international consortium, including governments, industry, and others. CGIAR, the network of 15 research centers that operates in 108 countries and has done so for 50 years, has many partnerships of its own. Ag Gateway is a consortium, particularly from industry. ISPA, International Society of Precision Ag, is a professional scientific organization which includes many government and academic and industry researchers. And finally, Open Geospatial Consortium, typically, well, as many of you know, is a community that develops geospatial standards and information. We know that agricultural use cases are particularly interesting and important to OGC. Most members of these groups, which are typically much larger than EGAD, are not expected to join RDA, but some of them will act as representatives or liaisons. These are, I should note, just the beginning groups. There's a number of others we're talking to, and we expect to identify other, particularly regional networks to invite in. In most cases, each of these networks is actually a hub of its own. So really, we're talking about being part of a rich network of slightly overlapping communities. In the next slide, we'll see how EGAD COP will act as a coordinating hub with RDA overlaid on top of these communities. The COP will ensure that members of these groups are involved not only in the central discussions that EGAD has, but also in the appropriate RDA working and interest groups. Here in the darker green are those working groups that are within the umbrella of EGAD, and the other lighter green are examples of related interest groups. Again, these particular RDA interest groups and working groups are just examples, and more need to be identified. This wedge on the left is just appearing. It is a crop data interoperability working group, which we expect to be the next active working group commissioned by EGAD members. One of the goals of the COP will be to ensure that when RDA groups need domain relevant use cases from agriculture, that our membership has an opportunity to provide those. And those use cases will be as diverse as our membership. If someone new, for example, an individual or an organization related to agriculture comes to RDA, we will help them find the best places for them to contribute. These are arrows that show that those new members will bring ideas or use cases from their networks to the working groups. And similarly, information from RDA can flow out to the orange and the blue, the yellow circles, when network representatives report back. This greatly expands the ability of RDA to have a magnified influence without having to reach everyone directly. While some of this movement of ideas may already be happening, the goal for the COP is to be much more intentional about it, both in the sense of identifying the right groups to engage and also in supporting them in what they need to both contribute and to disseminate information further. The next few slides will illustrate some more specific activities that we envision. First, the Go Fair Brazil Implementation Network is emerging already as an example of good data management practices and methods that were shared in EGAD and are now being implemented in a region. This ensures that a data sharing culture changes via training and infrastructure building. The strategy is described in the paper at the DOI listed in the lower right. And it's coordinated by the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, Embrapa. Embrapa incorporated the FAIR principles into its data governance policy, and its 43 research centers are generating a large volume of research data on various strategic themes of agricultural research. And they bring together diverse actors in the agricultural sciences. So the Go Fair Brazil Agro Implementation Network works closely with a more specific thematic implementation network, the Food Systems Implementation Network, and it contributes to strengthening local activities towards FAIR data at the same time as it collaborates with wider initiatives. This can serve as a model for how EGAD generally contributes to actions that support openness and the adoption of standards for data repositories around the world. Similarly, you may already have heard at this meeting about the CARE Indigenous Data Governance Principles. There's an RDA interest group whose members have been refining and promoting these principles, which empower people and focus on the ethical uses of data. That makes these principles complementary to the FAIR data principles, which are focused on the characteristics of the data themselves. EGAD has an opportunity to discuss how the CARE principles can best be implemented for agricultural use cases, and it can assure that they will become well-known and practiced by members of all their partner networks. One note I should mention is that while the EGAD COP does not see itself as responsible for adoption of RDA outputs, it's certainly in a good position to raise awareness and help facilitate that adoption. The last example I'll talk about is the topic of this session, the Sustainable Development Goals promoted by the United Nations. Of course, the goal of primary interest to EGAD is SDG 2, ending hunger achieving food security, and improving nutrition while promoting sustainable agriculture. This is such a critically important goal, and it's likely already shared by most EGAD members and their networks. Of course, there's related goals and goals that are subject to trade-offs with this one, but I'm focusing here on SDG 2. Now there's 8 targets for SDG 2, and each of those targets has associated indicators. I'm not going to read all of these out, but I will point out that EGAD already has a fair amount of expertise in data management relating to sustainable food systems, in genetic diversity, in nutrition, and in smallholder farm data. But it may have less expertise in markets and trade data and in food safety, or at least these have not been as prominent in discussions of our data standards and interoperability. So we can say that EGAD generally supports SDGs by promoting open science principles, which allow for others to build more easily on the work of others to accelerate scientific knowledge building in these critically important areas to society. However, we must point out that reporting on the targets, those indicators, using data to track those indicators of progress, has been set up via intergovernmental channels, and EGAD participants are not typically the technical staff that work for those governments. That said, EGAD participants can share their knowledge and influence activities in their networks, and those upstream impacts could move the needle on something like SDG 2, especially by supporting data-driven research on the interactions among SDGs and identifying ways to accelerate progress. In order to do this, we will have a discussion later today in our session for EGAD, and we'll continue that discussion next month in a special series of post-meeting seminars that we'll have. And we'll talk about how SDGs fit into the proposed roadmap for the EGAD COP. As I've mentioned, we probably have gaps in membership that will need to be filled with new networks that are more focused in these topical areas. We can identify those RDA working groups that will be particularly relevant for us to engage with as we consider how we can contribute to sustainable development. And all of this fits very well with our plans to focus on data and innovation in the Global South. With that, I will conclude my talk by saying that we intend to submit our proposal for community of practice to the RDA Secretariat in the coming weeks, after which it'll be out for comment, I think for about 6 weeks. Please look for that and consider whether you should join us, or if you know of relevant communities that we should engage with in your regions. And we're also finally open to your ideas for how we can better structure our activities to make the most of RDA. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Cynthia, even though you're not here and you can't hear us. And thank you, Alex, there for sharing your screen. Thanks, everybody, for those of you who have stayed on. I know we're 6 and a bit minutes over time now. But please bear with us just for one moment more. There's a final handful of slides just to kind of wrap things up here. So I'm publishing my desktop here. So as I was seeing here, we're nearing the end of the session. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the session today. Thanks again to everybody who's presented so far. But before we wrap up, I just want to go back and just bring our attention back to the RDA recommendations and outputs. So yeah, there's a few things I'd like to highlight for those of you interested in learning more about the outputs and their adoption. So firstly, on the RDA website, there is the recommendations and outputs catalog even, which allows you to search and filter the 50+ RDA recommendations and supporting outputs by discipline, by topic area, and by domain and that sort of thing, and by status. So please, there's a link on screen, but you should be able to navigate to this fairly straightforwardly from the RDA landing page. So, and if you are on any of the RDA recommendations pages, obviously with the full recommendation itself, there is, you also see that for each of the recommendations, there is a downloadable card which summarizes the challenges, kind of briefly summarizes the challenges and solutions set out by the recommendations. And finally, I would like to make you aware that all of the adoption stories are displayed together and kind of housed together on the RDA site. Again, there's a link on screen, but it should be fairly straightforward to get to that via the RDA website landing page. If you do think you have an adoption story that you would like to submit to promote your work, or if you have any questions about the whole submission procedure or the adoption process, please don't hesitate to contact the RDA Secretariat or myself, and we'll be happy to be able to answer any of your questions. So thanks again for everybody for bearing with us for 8 minutes, which isn't too bad considering 8 minutes over time. Thanks again to all our speakers today, and thanks to the organizing committee for all the work they're doing. I assume we'll continue to do over the next 2 days for organizing the plenary, and to our hosts at Juno as well. Thank you, everybody, and I'll end the session now. I'll just switch back to my screen. Okay, everybody, enjoy your break, and hopefully we'll see you everybody in sessions throughout the day and throughout the rest of the week. Bye bye.